All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our closing session today. A couple quick things before we get started. Thank you for joining us and thank you for coming in. I know folks are still joining and turning on their audio and all of that good stuff. The session is being recorded, so if you have to step away, all of our sessions today were recorded as well. So if you need to go back around noon tomorrow, we'll have all the sessions up. So you'll be able just to click into the same way you joined today and view all those recordings. Also, we'll be sending out an email that'll have a survey. We would love you to take the 5-10 minutes that'll take to fill that out and just give your feedback. I know the presenters all appreciate it, and we do as well, especially since this was our first of this exchange. So we're very happy to have your feedback for that. So with that, I want to thank everyone from Keystone Partners who is with us today, and I'm going to hand it off to Marge.
Thank you, Alex. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Trusted Advisor in Uncertain Times. I'm Marge Dupere, and I'm joined by several of my colleagues, our partners, Bob Hewes, David Brendel, Nancy Ortega. Omar Saldana, who's our VP of Client Services, will moderate a panel, which is at the center of our webinar and our time with you today. And Alexandra White, Client Services Manager for Leadership Development, and today's webinar producer. So welcome everyone, and our thanks to NEHRA for inviting us to participate. So let's take a look at how we'll spend the next hour, and we'll get started. I'll open with some context for our discussion. This is based on our shared experiences over the last 5 months with customers, with clients, and also share some recent data. Omar will then facilitate our panel where you'll hear stories from the field on what a trusted advisor looks like in action in real and recent organizational settings. And we'll open it up for your input with a mini case that Nancy will take us through. These coaches represent more than 60 years of experience across hundreds of clients and a wide range of sectors, from tech and life sciences to financial services, manufacturing, healthcare, higher ed, and professional services. So I know we will have an insightful discussion, and I know you'll join me in really appreciating the expertise of our team. I'll briefly offer some key takeaways, and then Alexandra will help us open it up to your questions towards the end before we close. As a quick reminder, we are Keystone Partners. We're a firm comprised of 3 services: career management, which is our largest, helping people in transition; our team, the team I lead, leadership development, formerly known as Camden Consulting Group before our rebranding; and Essex Partners, supporting executives in transition. Our leadership development business does 4 things: coaching, leadership development programs inside organizations and in public programs, management training, and consulting, which is primarily focused on senior team effectiveness. We're business coaches. We focus on actionable and sustainable programs. And with our recently acquired Chicago team, which Nancy leads, we are a community of over 60 coaches and consultants. And despite this uncertain economic time, we are continuing to pursue our national growth strategy across all 3 of those businesses. So let's talk about what we are seeing in organizations. And we know all of you as HR and OD practitioners are on the front lines. You and your leaders are addressing unprecedented challenges and new workforce opportunities. We haven't done this before in business, as a nation, and we're figuring it out together. So as you scan these challenges, I don't need to spend a lot of time here. We're living it. We're living it at work, with our families, and in our communities. And as this current state of social distancing, most folks working remotely, and lots of uncertainty on many levels, as that is sustained, it can get more challenging. And as we all talk about in our team meetings, what worked in March, April, May, June may need to be adjusted as we enter months 6, 7, and potentially beyond. For many, we're rethinking how we work. There are changing business models. And for many, that has actually added work streams. It has increased burden. And I see that with our team, where we had to move everything to virtual. And that added work in addition to what was the steady state. So we talk with a lot of customers, HR people, OD people, leaders who are feeling spread pretty thin. At the same time, we've seen some positive aspects emerge and opportunities and learning created as a result of these challenges. And top of mind for us as we all put these comments together for all of you, as we witness the social change and racial justice movements, we see many organizations reinvigorating their DEI initiatives. We see leaders and employees finding their voices and engaging in inspirational communications and supporting this change. We also see reframing and creating new ways of working. And reframing is something we talk a lot about in coaching. We've had to do that. So new ways of connecting with teams and colleagues, delivering products and services in innovative ways that keeps the revenue rolling. As many of our clients report, we've learned how to be resilient and more flexible, even though sometimes it feels like we don't have a heck of a lot of control over situations or outcomes. As leaders, as OD and HR practitioners, and as coaches, this can all feel particularly challenging because we've got our own stuff, our own set of concerns, as well as those of our employees and those people we are supporting inside organizations. So here are a couple of data points. Our friends at Leading Indicator Systems recently conducted a study on the emotional toll of COVID-19 among American workers working remotely. And some of you may have seen this, and you can see the white paper on their website. They found employee emotional needs have undergone a fundamental change. So gone are typical work-focused desires for achievement and recognition. And they found those are being replaced to some degree with pursuit of personal growth, higher purpose and meaning, logically the need for more security, and social needs for love and connection. Those now top the list. And we've seen this in other times of crisis. We saw this after September 11th. We saw some of it to a degree with the sustained recession. LIS results also demonstrated the critical importance of showing genuine concern for employee well-being and suggest the need for employers to reevaluate return to office policies, practices, and benefits. Really think about communicating the linkage between the work and the corporate mission as employees seek more meaning. And we know all of you and your leaders are on the front lines of addressing those emotional, social, and work needs of your employees. Our colleagues at MRG recently did a survey as part of a webinar, and I found this quite compelling. So they surveyed HR, OD folks, and coaches about the leaders that they're working with and asked this question: what aspect of leadership is currently most challenging for them? And you look at these top two, connecting with people and demonstrating confidence and credibility. I don't think these would have been the top two in Q1, but they certainly are now. And as trusted advisors, it's so important that we understand what leaders are concerned about, what they're finding challenging, and then collaborating with them on solutions. So before I turn it over to Omar and our panel, I offer this summary of leadership challenges. And in these challenges, of course, lie opportunities for trusted advisors. As you scan this and as you think about the questions you'd like to ask at the end, as you prepare to hear stories from the field, let's reflect on these and think about what's different in your organizations or which of these really resonate. So certainly we see leaders very focused on driving business results, driving employee engagement, sustaining performance and productivity. We saw with the MRG data point, sustaining confidence and really thinking about what are we communicating and how and when, particularly on some difficult topics. And then finally, defining the organization's response to all of this current context in a meaningful way. So I'm going to turn it over to Omar. Turn off our slides so you can see our panelists and enjoy that conversation. Omar.
Thank you, Marge. I appreciate it. Welcome, audience. Welcome, panel. These are certainly different and complex times. We are doing things that we've never done before. And with that, for some insights, I wanted to go to our panel of Nancy Ortega, Bob Hewes, and David Brendel. Before I go there, I wanted to talk to the audience and say, as we get started, you may have comments and questions. And what we will do with the help of Alexandra is we will note them and we will come back to them in the Q&A so as to keep the flow going and then really be able to focus on your questions. So with that, trusted advisor, that's today's topic. Bob, can you start us off? What does it mean to be a trusted advisor?
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks, Omar. This is a really great question because it's good to start with a definition or really an intention. You know, at its core, being a trusted advisor, it's helping another person work through their particular issues. And we'll talk as a panel, we'll get into specific capabilities and the things that we should focus on at doing that. But as a trusted advisor, you're really helping somebody work through. You're a little independent, may have to suspend judgment, but it's to help them work things through. And that's what we should keep as the intention.
Someone who helps people work things through. I like the succinctness and the simplicity of it. Nancy, Bob touched on, and I'd like you to tell us a little more, what are the characteristics and behaviors of a trusted advisor?
Sure.
Where do they spend their energy?
Sure, of course. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. You know, thinking about behaviors of an effective trusted advisor, the first one that comes to mind for me is a listener, someone who's very present focused, someone who listens for the words, but also listens for what's not being said, someone who's listening for patterns and assumptions. And that's really going to help the dialogue with the person that you're talking to. Bob also mentioned being non-judgmental. You want to create a safe environment for the person to kind of say what they think, even if it might be unpopular or, you know, person might be uncomfortable, but you really want to create that safety and that confidentiality. And the last one that comes to mind for me is someone that asks questions that can facilitate a conversation.
Thank you. David, your thoughts on characteristics and behaviors of a trusted advisor?
Thank you, Omar. I'll follow up on some of what Bob and Nancy just said, all of which I agree with. When I was considering this question, I kind of thought about the word advisor. It's a little bit different than the word advice, although the word advice certainly can be part of it. And following on what Nancy said about asking questions and listening, one of the things a trusted advisor does, and probably what he or she does right up front in a conversation, is have the advisee talk and listen to themselves talk. And So being a sounding board is a piece of being a trusted advisor, and helping facilitate the person's talking out loud, listening to themselves, and in many cases having a self-discovery process and a process of potentially solving their own problems. So like any good executive coach, that's one of our core values as a coach, is asking good questions, listening, and helping with that self-awareness and self-discovery process. It's part of also what a trusted advisor does. But as I said, advice also can be part of what a trusted advisor does. And as the conversation proceeds and the trusted advisor has more information, there may be some specific guidance that that comes out of it. And that loops back to what Bob said right at the beginning, is helping another person solve their problems.
Thank you, David. Panel, from your work in the last 5 months, and the 5 months, of course, refer to when COVID really took over, would you share an example of a leader or an HR professional who has demonstrated these characteristics and behaviors that we just talked about? What does it look like in action, with some examples? Nancy, can we start with you?
Sure. So we're working with a software company. It's a technology company in the suburbs of Chicago. And they've gone through a lot of change. The CEO's only been there for a year. He took over from the founder and CEO who'd been CEO for 25 years. And the VP of HR, she's new. She's only been there for 8 months. So they're going through a lot of culture change, with the new CEO really wanting to kind of advance the culture and advance the leadership expectations. So one thing I noticed that the VP of HR did is she was very thoughtful about asking questions about the due diligence process. They're actually acquiring a competitor. So she was very thoughtful about asking questions and trying to see where human capital fit in. And she kind of looked for her opportunities and really talked to the CEO about really thinking about assessing the culture, knowing that he wanted to advance the leadership expectations, and then acquiring another company. And so they actually jointly agreed to do a cultural assessment, and we're supporting them on that. But I think she really tied it to what his goals were, and she asked him a lot of questions. And they kind of got to the same point of this solution that is really going to help advance their human capital and really kind of help them understand what steps they need to take for leaders.
Thank you, Nancy. Bob, can you tell us what it looks like in action?
Yeah, it's a really good question to think about in action. So I have an executive that went through a little bit of a reorg, and they were responsible, among other things, handling HR issues, which is really good for our audience here, for a unit. But in the reorg, the HR needs got actually pushed out to about 5 other individuals that started to report into a central HR. And this is a large higher ed institution. And what the person had to do, the problem here was this person had to make a shift from, in essence, solving the problems directly. They were supposed to still have a role. They didn't call it trusted advisor. They used a little more of the business partner language. What the person had to learn to do, and honestly, it took about a month and a half, was get in and help people set things up and understand what was going on through asking questions. Omar, that seems to be a theme we're going to have here. At first, they would kind of still dive in and try to solve it. And what they really needed to do was enable the others to solve it well. They had a lot of experience. This might be another thing that some of us that are trying to have a good intent on trusted advisorship is, when you have a lot of experience, you can see solutions, pitfalls, all that. This person had to shift it into drawing it out with questions. The other thing, that the end result here is what they noticed after about a month and a half, 2 months, they actually got very good at asking these questions, and there was much less of an urge to dive in and solve the problem, that they really got the others doing.
Right. Thank you, Bob. And that is a theme, to really get others to have the skills to accomplish what they need to do. One of the challenges that Marge mentioned that many leaders are facing right now is around communications. there's really so much. Determining how and what to communicate, what to say when decisions have not yet been made. And I know we're all living this every day around heated topics such as social change, communicating to my own team so that they feel like a true team. There's just so much related to communications. Bob, what are you seeing around communications?
This is a good one because I can say this, it's virtually on every single assignment, Omar. There's some angle of communication. One thing we see is it seems to be at two extremes. If you think of a spectrum, there's something you need to communicate. Could be a reopening or some other issue. We seem to have people fall into two camps, and we have to watch this ourselves. They either go to the extreme where they talk about everything, probably some things they shouldn't talk about, some things that are still uncertain, but they're making certain. Or we'll have people say, I don't know anything, therefore I can't say anything. And what we work on with them is to understand you may not know it all, things may not be definitive, but what is it that you can say that's still true and authentic? Just quick example, say something around a reopening. You may not have a date, but clearly management is talking about that. Well, you could relay to your group or to whomever you're doing that they are talking about it. It looks like a September one, but no date yet, versus saying, hey, I think it's going to be September 15th or something like that, or saying, I can't tell you anything about it, so I just don't talk to me about it. We got to get off those two extremes.
Right, right. David, what are you seeing in terms of communications?
It's funny you ask about communications because I've been doing some coaching with somebody in a communications program within a higher education setting. And the reopening of their office has become a big issue. The people that report up to the person I'm coaching are very nervous about coming back in, and in some cases refusing to. Others would like to get back in sooner than others, so we see a wide spectrum of that. The person I'm coaching has a boss, a manager, who is also reporting up to the president of the university, and from that end, they want a plan. When are you getting everybody back into the office? We need them there. So my client has been caught in the middle. He doesn't feel safe about the return to the office, and he respects his direct reports not wanting to go back in, but he is being asked for a plan from the higher ups. So part of the coaching has been to help him become not in a passive position where he's feeling overwhelmed by a question he can't answer. Give us a plan about the office return. What he has worked on is becoming a trusted advisor to his boss and shifting the conversation away from a premature plan to return to work and more of a focus on the responsiveness of his communication team. These are photographers and journalists who cover what's going on in this large university setting. And the conversation has completely shifted. So in this case, my client, who is a direct report to his boss, the direct report has become the trusted advisor, talking about how my team is going to be responsive. That's what you really need here. You don't need them physically back in the office. And of course, he didn't say it in such a direct or heavy-handed way. But the effect has been to appropriately delay the return to the office and focus on the deliverable items and the responsiveness of his team.
Right. Thank you, David. And that return to the office is clearly an issue which many of us are thinking about. And we're going to now take a mini case and invite the audience to weigh in. And Nancy, if you would set this up for us.
Of course. So this is a mini case we put together. This is a real situation, and we'd love to get your thoughts and recommendations. So let me just give you an overview. So this is a construction and engineering company. It's headquartered on the East Coast, but the central region is in the suburbs of Chicago. And as a company, they don't have a work from home policy. So the central region president has everyone working in the office, and I think they've been in the office since June. So back at work since June, they've had 3 different COVID cases that they've had to deep clean the office 3 times. There's kind of a pattern of cases happening. And, you know, employees are anxious. You have employees that have health issues. You have employees that are pregnant. The productivity is reducing because they're very worried about possibly getting sick. The president of the Central Region, he's frustrated. He feels like maybe people are blaming him. This is a company policy. He didn't create the policy, but he feels like people are kind of blaming him for the situation. And he went to his HR business partner to share his frustration.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Nancy. So audience, this is your moment. If you were this HRBP, how would you approach this leader as a trusted advisor? What would you say? So audience, please go to chat and enter trusted advisor types of behaviors or things you would say. So we will be monitoring chat. So if you go there, and for those of you that are not sure what to say, please read the chat, as that may give you ideas, or you can build on an idea. And Nancy, you may have some thoughts on what can be done or what was done. Let's see what we have coming in. Nancy, why don't you start us off? Tell us about what could be done.
Right. Well, the first thing that the HR business partner did is she really talked to him about what leads him to believe that he's to blame. And it turned out that no one said to him, "I'm blaming you," but he had created an assumption that because people were unhappy, scared, or stressed, that they blamed him personally. So she was able for him to understand and see the connection between, an assumption he made, because no one is actually blaming him. And he acknowledged that. He kind of had put that on himself, and that wasn't really accurate.
And Nancy, you probably see a comment from Brenda Kirawak. We have others coming in. So Nancy, when you're ready, share your thoughts on some of the audience suggestions, and you can start to play out the story and what the considerations all were for leader and HR partner.
Right. So, I mean, you can imagine it's an interesting situation. You have an HR business partner who wants to be a trusted advisor to this president. It's a very stressful situation. Time is of the essence. You know, we have this, very extreme illness that's going around. So I really like the ideas here on the screen. After talking to him initially, what she did was she asked if they have a senior leadership team that she's part of. She asked if he would be open to having a discussion with the 4 people from the senior leadership team. And he did agree. And so really the 4 of them really talked about, as a region, what recommendations can we provide? What's in our control as a region to decide? What do we have to get buy-in from corporate? And that kind of helped open him up to see that there might be other possibilities beyond following the corporate guidelines.
Yes, thank you, Nancy. David, I want to get your thoughts on what you would recommend on the responses that our audience have provided.
I think what I would say builds on some of what I'm reading here in the chat from the audience, and also what Nancy was saying, which is dig in a little bit deeper with the employees so that the reactions aren't only characterized as anxious, stressed, frustrated, but what are the actual concerns, going a little bit deeper. It may be different depending on the number of people and how many people and how much time is available to have those conversations isn't clear. But we're all evidence-based, data-driven people. Get some more information from these people and flesh out what the concerns are, and get some conversations going. It is possible that the employees need to do just a bit more, even venting. Probably goes beyond just venting, but that's a way to start, to be a sounding board and start to collect themes. And then I think that hooks up with one of the other questions about, is there any way to influence up here? If there are 3 COVID cases, well, maybe it's not safe for people to be in the office. And so some of the question as a trusted advisor that I might suggest this region president consider is, how do you communicate up the organization that maybe this work from home policy question should be readdressed in light of the cases? So there's an angle looking toward the employees, and then there's an angle looking up in the organization.
Right, right. Thank you, David. We're on our last question, and I asked the panel to answer quickly because we want to hand it back to Marge. So as we've listened to the panel so far, some of you in the audience may be wondering, what can I do to advance and strengthen my skills, my capabilities as an internal practitioner? How do I become that trusted advisor? And David, why don't we continue with you on your thoughts on how to become that trusted advisor? And if you could be on the brief side.
Yes. Well, it certainly involves taking some time and making it a priority to talk with people. In the COVID era now, we have less of an opportunity to bump into people at the proverbial water cooler. So it does possibly involve proactively setting up meetings on a screen like this or by phone. But that also creates an opportunity. Since we're not having the informal interactions, go ahead and take the time, have the open conversations, do the good listening, be a sounding board, possibly give advice. So more of an intentional focus could be one of the consequences of the COVID problem.
Great. Thank you, David. Bob, your thoughts on how to become that trusted advisor?
Yeah, it's building off of what I think David's really leading right up to. Think of that famous real estate thing, but we'll apply it here. Practice, practice, practice. You pick one element. We've had the theme of questions here. So when you're in a discussion, you're on lots of video calls, think of how you can practice that very intentional listening, suspending of judgment, being that true active listener. We all know that's so important. It's hard to do this in the moment. And maybe you get so you have a set of questions at the ready that you know you can use. And one other quick thing I'd toss right in there is be an observer here. Really be a student. You can watch others asking fantastic questions or not so fantastic. The key is practice an element of being a trusted advisor. Be intentional.
Great, great. Thank you. Nancy, your thoughts. What would you add on how to become a trusted advisor?
I mean, I think we're talking a lot about asking questions, and there's a lot of resources out there that give example questions, sample questions that you could use or you can adjust to your own voice. And the two I like the best is, there's a model, advocacy and inquiry. And inquiry is really seeking to understand. And so there's great resources out there that have inquiry type questions. A real, true, time-tested one is Peter Senge, The Fifth Discipline. It's his field book. And so that actually has sample inquiry questions in there that you might read. You could use them, you could adjust to your own voice. Another book I really like is Sir John Whitmore. This is the GROW model. And so this is a great foundational book for coaching. But that GROW model, which is GROW, there are sample questions in the book for each phase. And again, you can use those as a trusted advisor. And again, adjust for yourself. So those are two options I might look into.
Great. Well, thank you very much, panel. Nancy, Bob, David. Marge is going to share some summary points about trusted advisor and then take us into the audience Q&A. Marge?
Thanks, Omar. And thank you, panel and my colleagues. And thanks to all of you for your comments in chat about how you respond to that mini case. So as you heard in those compelling stories from the field and the ways in which effective leaders and trusted advisors are showing up in the current context, we heard many of these characteristics and behaviors. And you also just heard them in the partner's response to how do you become a trusted advisor. So there's key themes around empathy, authenticity, truly actively listening, building relationships, building trust and collaboration. And I think the simplest way to remember all of that is that first bullet, which is focus on the client, not the self. And that client can be internal clients, external clients. It can be your boss, it can be a board member, it can be a business partner you're supporting in an organization. And we also heard in some of the comments, be an observer, Bob said, be a student, right? And as David said, we're evidence-based. So observing, you're gathering data. And Nancy said, listening for what's not being said, right? And the powerful use of inquiry and advocacy. And then, as David talks about a lot, psychological safety, creating that safe space, and showing up without judgment. The best resource that we know on this specific topic is really the work of Meister, Green, and Galford. This is a business classic, and I was pretty shocked to realize they have just published their 20th anniversary edition. Hard to believe this book is 20 years old. And you may recall the work that Andrea Howe did with Charles Green, which is creating this field book. We will add, we're going to send this deck to Alex and Sarah. We will add the resources that Nancy mentioned, Senge, the Fifth Discipline, Whittemore's work on the GROW model, and some resources on advocacy and inquiry, and send this to you. We remind you that in these times, we're all trying to show up as good humans. So if there's one message through all of this, to show up with empathy as colleagues, and certainly as leaders, leading with compassion and empathy. So I'm going to turn it over to Alexandra, who will monitor both chat and Q&A as we open it up for your questions for all of us. Alexandra?
No new questions yet, Marge, just some of our comments during the mini case. If you want to review any of that, we can do that.
This is the moment we all dread while we sit and look at the screen and wait for someone to ask a question. But we'll be patient and confident that there's a question somewhere out there. At least we won't run over, Omar.
That's true.
When we reviewed the list of challenges in the current context and some of the examples that you heard from the panel, we would be curious to understand, did these resonate? Or across your organizations, are you having a different experience, or is there a different take on some of the challenges you're facing as HR and OD practitioners, or differences with what you think your leaders are facing?
I had another question here, Marge, of asking if we're hearing from clients that some avenues, video calls, email, are more effective than others during this extended remote work period, since some people are getting a little zoomed out. So what other kind of avenues are available?
One of the things that we heard, we did a workshop in late March and early April, resilience and well-being in challenging times. And then we did another one on managing remotely. And one of the things we heard from our customers is managers thinking maybe everything needs to be a Zoom meeting. Because we've lost the stop by your office and let's grab a cup of coffee, we've lost some of the informal ways of connecting. Everything is a meeting or an appointment. So one of the things we heard was managers really thinking about, is this a meeting? Is this an email? Could it be a text or a phone call? And then some hesitancy among managers to call people because they know they're home, where we might not have hesitated to call a colleague. That hesitation and that respect, really, that they're home with their family. So again, we go to reframing and really observing and assessing a situation. What's the best communication medium for the topic? Doesn't have to be a Zoom meeting. And how might we replace those informal chats? Someone told me recently, calling each employee one-on-one and just saying, I have no agenda. I'm just calling to see how you're doing. So you're very clear on, you don't have to prepare. I'm not looking for an outcome. I'm just checking in. So that's what I would offer. Others?
Well, apropos of that kind of meeting, Marge, I had written a little piece on our Keystone blog about walking meetings. And there's actually some good psychology research that shows that for certain types of meetings, this is hard to do as a group meeting, but in a one-on-one discussion, if people are in motion, walking, put on your AirPods and get out, of course, it's good for physical health and changes the scenery. But for creative, strategic, vision-based, creative kinds of conversations, there's actually psychology research showing that people brainstorm and are more creative when they are walking or otherwise physically in motion. It's like taking your kids out for a drive when they won't sit down in the living room and talk with you about something important, just get them moving, or shoot hoops. It's the same kind of thing. So if both people agree on a walking meeting, it can be very good for divergent and creative thinking. If you're trying to do some convergent thinking, like come to a decision or you're in an important negotiation, the research says don't do that. So it's another way to get away from the screen, get out of the same routine over and over, and get some of your steps in for the day.
Yeah, you know, just to add what you said, David, one of the leaders I'm coaching, she's in healthcare, and what she does for our coaching sessions is she takes it outside on her porch and on her backyard. You know, our coaching meeting, she's not typing on the computer. It's really a time for her to try to be open to different ideas. She brings a notepad, but it's such a nice break for her from the different meetings that she has. She tends to be a little bit more open to topics and to different points of view. And so just that physically moving somewhere for that meeting has helped her. So I've seen people do that.
I'll add in one more thing on this, which is just another angle. It's fun to brainstorm with us here. Is this zoomed out thing is one thing I hear is because it's back to back, right on top of each other. Maybe we'd be very intentional. Can you end a meeting 15 minutes earlier? Can it be 5 minutes, 10 minutes? It's amazing. Some people just default to an hour and we fill it because it's an hour. It doesn't need to be that way. You can be very intentional and even take it to another level and say, this one's normally an hour. We're just going to book it for 30 minutes. And it can get us into that mode to be quicker with things. If it's a walking one, go longer. If it's one of these other ones, make it shorter.
That's right.
We've got a related question about how to recreate those water cooler moments intentionally when we're all remote, which I think some of that has been touched upon here, but if there's anything additional to comment, touch upon that.
Well, kind of adding to what Marge said, you know, here at Keystone, what we've implemented is skip level meetings. And so it's really randomly senior leaders are paired with individuals of different levels in the company. And it's a 30-minute call. There's no set agenda, but really the agenda is what the employee wants to talk about. Sometimes you'll find the topics go to work topics. Sometimes they go to personal topics. Sometimes they're just trying to get to know a senior leader they don't know. But it's just a nice break from a meeting that has a structured deliverable. And I think employees are really embracing it. And actually, we just finished the first round, and we'll be rotating, and senior leaders will get new employees to connect with. So I think we found a lot of benefits from it.
I see at the very end of that question, what approaches to avoid. And the one thing that pops to mind is avoid too much of a good thing. I think when people are too inundated with too many of these types of meetings, that they can get overwhelmed or frustrated by them. So, and I think we've all been trying to figure that out over the last several months about what's the right balance for planning intentionally these types of meetings to stay connected, but not overdoing it.
You know, we had another one on our blog. Dave mentioned this earlier. It's this idea of making ad hoc calls. It's a little like the one where Marge said there isn't an agenda. I think we've become very task focused, probably out of survival mode and necessity. But one of the things is, let's recreate those water cooler ones where if you have a set of colleagues you used to talk with, this is going to sound funny. I'm suggesting scheduling an ad hoc call. But if you look and say, hey, I have 5 colleagues I used to talk with, just ping them like a text and say, you know, hey, Marge, I want to run this idea by you. Do you have a second? I just want to talk with you. It wasn't already scheduled. And, you know, if she's not available, sometimes you'll get an answer, hey, I'm not available now, but can you give me a call at 4:15? We can talk a bit. But if you did a few of those a week, you're almost recreating the water cooler type of thing.
Thank you. We've had 2 questions around defining and building trust, or building trust that was lost after a difficult time.
David, you want to take that?
Tips and so recommend for defining and building trust. Well, I think I guess it depends on, has there been a loss of trust, and is there a problem where things should be done in a very focused way, or is this more about taking good relationships or not fully formed relationships and building on them intentionally? I think I would draw on a lot of what we've said so far is, without overdoing it, be intentional about scheduling meetings. You're not going to bump into the person in the hallway or be able to grab a cup of coffee. But spend 5 minutes at the beginning of the day or a couple of times a week and think about, who do I need to either reestablish trust with or build trust with, and at least try to do 1 or 2 things a week in that vein, rather than getting too focused on the tasks at home or the scheduled meetings.
You know, there's a thing we said in here, and I like David's thinking back what we said. This is really depends is a great answer. If it was lost, maybe we need to go back to what actually happened and engage in a good dialogue. Because, you know, if we've lost trust between the 2 of us, what really happened? We probably got a lot of assumptions. You want to have one of those, maybe a kind of a real conversation, but using what we talk with, so that let's make sure we're on good common ground as we can work it forward. Nothing's worse than just, I thought it was A, you thought it was Z, and we just keep operating like that.
And we were both wrong.
Yeah, we were both wrong, exactly.
So we've also had somebody ask about the idea of having senior leaders who are struggling to connect with people in a difficult time, and suggestions, particularly for introverted leaders, to kind of make more effective attempts in this remote work environment.
In some ways, this whole situation has been the revenge of the introverts, because introverts are happily working and productive and able to continually recharge their batteries by themselves at home. But of course, you know, the flip side of that is there are fewer opportunities, and it may be harder to initiate that contact. So if you know you're an introvert, do a little extra reaching out. And if you know somebody on your team as an introvert, do a little more reaching out to them without overwhelming them.
You know, maybe one thing to consider too, Marge was talking about the medium or the mode in communication. You know, as an introvert, maybe you make it just phone calls. Let's eliminate the weirdness that can happen with a video call. And you think of, as you're doing that too, as the leader, maybe you come up with a few open type questions. You know, probably the worst thing to do is if I ask a question, do you think, somebody says no, it's going to be a short question, and those can make a short conversation and make it painful. But maybe try and just telephone call so we eliminate the video tough body language too.
Right. And what you're saying is really open-ended questions, because you really want that person to talk and to feel comfortable. So, you know, on this call, that doesn't have to be Zoom, you know, your role as a senior leader is to help that person feel comfortable, you know, start with some rapport building, and then have a few open-ended questions and let that person take that conversation and share what they think. And to have that time to talk with you is so valuable, and that's really going to help their engagement.
I think that's a really great point, Nancy. And you know, open-ended questions, it seems like it's deceptively simple to ask an open-ended question. An open-ended question, I think, you know, probably the best definition of it is it cannot be appropriately answered as yes or no. It requires elaboration. How are you doing can't be yes or no. So as you're asking the questions, they really should be sculpted. And this probably goes to the wider question about being a trusted advisor. It's not just about asking questions, it's the open-ended questions and the careful listening. So really well sculpted. And like I said earlier, about evidence-based, we're looking to get information flow, and a yes or no gives much less information than a conversation.
One characteristic we know about those who tend towards introversion is the preference to reflect, the preference to process internally, as opposed to extroverts who have a preference to talk it out. So if this is a leader, an HR business partner is supporting, or a leader someone is reporting to, and you're managing up with an introvert, some early information on the topic can be very useful, as opposed to in the moment, here's what I want to talk to you about, to say, could we speak tomorrow at 8? Quick preview, here's the topic. Can be helpful for those who tend towards introversion. To take a page from Nancy on what we're doing at Keystone Partners, we have bi-weekly all hands meetings, and questions are sent in advance anonymously. And we have a couple folks on the leadership team who do tend towards introversion. And so those questions come in a week in advance. We look at them as a leadership team and craft some meaningful responses. So bottom line, a little bit of notice can help for those who tend towards introversion.
You know, Marge, a great idea you have. And say if you're the leader that's introverted, you could send, just think about, we're saying this little bit of prep or eye time ahead of time. If I'm the introverted leader, maybe I send that email ahead of time, make sure day before, saying, you know, I really want to talk about your topics. What are the things you're interested in talking about? And if somebody even just gives you 2 ideas, now you got them ahead of time. You get to think about it a little bit versus just making it all on the spot.
Exactly. Thank you.
There's another question there that caught my eye about working with the original owners who are in the senior management position and just want to get product out the door and a little bit less of a focus on people development. So I found that a very interesting question about how to get that conversation going and be a trusted advisor to somebody who may not be as focused on talent development as all of us on this in this program truly are. So I part of what I was just thinking about is how do you get a conversation going that may help these owners understand that more product will get out the door if there's more data from what people are thinking and what may be stressful or anxious, causing anxiety for them. So I found that a very interesting and challenging question that came in there from Derek.
I did too. So that actually reminds me of a conversation I had yesterday with a client. So this client is a food service company who actually has done very well in COVID. A lot of their frozen meals have just increased in terms of revenue. But the VP of HR is new, very experienced, but the owners have never done any leadership development. And they're very successful right now. So what we decided on, kind of our strategy is, we're going to start with piloting something small. So we have an individual who's very interested in a leader receiving a 360. So we're just going to do assessment and feedback. We're not going to do a 6-month engagement, something small, and really use the success as that person as a champion to talk with other peers about the benefits and the value that they got out of the experience. And between the VP of HR and I, we really thought this is a small step which can really increase the number of people that can influence the founder and the owner to invest more in leadership development. But that's, you know, after our discussion yesterday, that's our first step. That's what we're going to try for.
Nice. I'm aware of the time. Alexandra, I want to check in with you and see if you feel like we've covered everything in chat and Q&A.
Yeah, I think we've got everyone.
So I'm going to turn it over to Alex in just a moment in the event there's any final comments. So first, thank you so much to all of the participants for joining. And again, thanks to NEHRA for the invitation. Thank you to our team for a great discussion. I see Tracy has joined.
I have.
Hi.
I've been listening in. So. But I didn't want to disturb. So I will just echo what Marge said. Thank you all so much for participating in our first ever Learning and Development Exchange. As I mentioned this morning when we kicked off, it's not exactly how we planned, especially the virtual part, but also just a lot of the focus, right, has, because of everything that has happened, we really kind of retooled a lot of the content that people learned today in the conversations, because you know, it is a completely different world than when we planned this back in, you know, January and February. So we're excited to have it under our belt. We're excited to have had all of you as experts help us wrap this up. I really definitely appreciate it. This is not uncomplicated work, right? You know, the HR space, I know my HR colleagues are working really hard and trying to figure all this out. And in my favorite space, which is learning in OD, it's sort of where I started, it's also just really complex, as you guys have all talked about, and things that were formerly a little bit simpler, you know, reading body language. You know, now we're forced to like look at the dot on the screen so it looks like we're looking at you, but then we want to figure out body language of all the other people. You know, it's hard enough one-on-one, let alone when you're trying to do it with several people. So, you know, that's part of the reason why I think we're zoomed out. I know I've definitely fallen into that trap of back-to-back Zoom meetings, but all of the other advice that this panel gave in the last hour has been fantastic, and I appreciate again your time and attention to this. You, as far as the participants of this is the last session. This is it. If you've been with us all day or popped in and out, everything was recorded, so it will be up and available within the next 48 hours, if not sooner. And you'll also get a survey so that we can, you know, learn how we did and what topics resonated and where we might want to deep dive a little bit more in the future. As I mentioned, this is the first Learning and Exchange NEHRA has done. It's part of our overall strategy to focus on the functions. Currently, we have DEI, legal and compliance, talent, management and acquisition, and then of course the learning and development. So as we continue to grow these programs, we're also looking to grow community. We already have it in the DEI space, but we're looking to build some other communities around those topics that I mentioned. So you should keep an eye out for that if you're interested in learning more or building a deeper network in the learning and development space. We'll definitely be coming forth with that soon. So with all of that, again, thank you to the panel. Thank you to Alex and Sarah, who I know is listening back there somewhere, for all of your work in putting together this learning and development exchange. And we'll see you, obviously, hopefully see you in person at some time soon, but we'll be back in touch soon. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.